welcome everyone to the Australian Bitcoin podcast. I'm Justin, your host, and today I'm joined by Rusty from WorldofRusty.com to discuss his Bitcoin journey and his Bitcoin-related graphic design business. But before we start, a quick word from our sponsor. The Australian Bitcoin podcast is brought to you by hardblock.com.au. Hardblock is Australia's oldest Bitcoin-only exchange. They have no added fees and are optimized for dollar cost averaging. Sign up to Hardblock today using the discount link in the description below to receive free auto-send batched Bitcoin withdrawals for the next 6 months. All right, Rusty, how's it going?
I am okay. I'm going to go with okay because as of recording right now, we're literally hitting fresh lows in Bitcoin, but I'm okay.
I know everything's kind of just seems to be dying at the moment, doesn't it? I know Bitcoin has about a million, 21 million lives, in fact, so I'm sure it's going to be just fine. I don't know about everything else, though, in regards to like the shitcoin casinos that seem to be having a bit of trouble processing withdrawals, as well as even things like stocks, bonds. They all seem to be on a bit of a downward trend for the last at least 24 hours, pretty drastically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, a toxic Bitcoin maximalist, self-proclaimed. So so I guess the part that I am okay with is all of the shitcoins going to zero. I'm completely good with that. I mean, everyone goes through their journey of kind of trying and dabbling in these things. They come into Bitcoin. And it's funny, actually, like a lot of people have exactly the same story. And I think it's just, as part of Bitcoin, you come in because people talking about it, all these, you see all these people making money, and so you come in for these gains, and then you start learning about it, and you think maybe you're a bit late, so you dive into these shitcoins, these altcoins, and because you think you maybe missed the boat on Bitcoin, you're waiting for the next thing to come along and do what Bitcoin did, but it just never does. And another issue is that people don't actually end up realizing any of their gains most of the time in these shitcoins. They end up just riding them to zero, thinking that it's gonna go back. The only thing that comes back is Bitcoin, and it happens every cycle.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of okay.
Likewise, man. I have probably like a bit of an opinion that some of other Bitcoiners might not like to hear, but I would happily have Bitcoin go back to, I don't know, some ridiculous figure like sub 10,000 if it actually leads to the death of the majority of shitcoins, if it leads to the death of things like, yield farming Bitcoin, but then obviously taking on the huge third-party risk, which is obviously what's happened with Celsius. Like, Bitcoin dumping usually tends to kill these things off, or at least bring them to a level where people perceive them as dead, and then they're as good as dead. So I would quite happily have things halve again from here, or halve again even from there, if it means that we're actually clearing out some of the garbage, because there is a lot of garbage that's built up in the last few years of the bull market. So it's it's time to clear out some of the leveraged hands. And I agree with you. Sorry, you go.
I was going to say the only issue is that, and I'm class of 2017. I'm not sure when you came.
Exactly the same, right at the peak in December 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I kind of got the slightly halfway up. That's when I kind of jumped in, but the I don't know. You've probably noticed this as well. Every time we have a bear market, and there hasn't been too many, but every time we have a dip or a bear market, we all say the same thing. We all say, we're going down. Doesn't matter. We're going to watch all these shitcoins die. Everyone's going to realize it's just Bitcoin only, and then Bitcoin dominance is going to go through the roof, and then we're all back on track. And it just never happens.
You're right.
And it's just the next cycle of people come in, and they see that when we have the next rise, everyone will say, okay, get into Bitcoin, and then once again, euphoria will set in. Everybody, the newbies will start getting distracted by people on Twitter talking about other things, and start investing in crap again, and the whole thing starts again. I mean, it is definitely a hope that people will come to their senses, but I don't know. I feel like it's part of the journey. One of the things I like to talk about is how Bitcoin is almost like a filter, and and it's people come in, they have you kind of grow up in this world where it's all about greed and accumulating things, and Bitcoin kind of teaches you to be humble and stack sats, and not over leverage yourself, and cut that greed, and just stack sats and stay humble, and so that's my hope, is that the next round of people will hopefully learn that lesson.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm pretty confident they will. It seems to be every time that we have a big downtrend like this, we just gather more kind of proper hodlers, like proper Bitcoiners, on the way back up. And you are right; like there'll always be some level of shitcoining that comes back. Even something like the LUNA UST kind of debacle. There was a lot of people at the recent local Bitcoin meetup that were saying like, "Oh, this is it. This is the the watershed moment. This is, people are not going to come back from this. People are going to like migrate away from shitcoins, and it'll never happen again." And I said like, I don't think so. I think give it 3 to 6 months, and people will be jumping back into Luna, maybe even less. And it took about, I don't know, a week, and all of a sudden there was Luna C or C Luna or Luna 2.0 or whatever they're calling it essentially, and people are getting hyped for it. So I agree with you there. We always talk about when Bitcoin dumps, everything else will die, and then Bitcoin will be the only one thing that recovers. But it doesn't always work out like that, does it? It always ends up being people get euphoric, and then they need to learn that the stove is hot by touching it. Unfortunately, I think that's just part of the kind of the baptism by, literal fire. Sometimes when it comes to Bitcoin, you have to go through that process to learn this is why we Bitcoin only, and this is why we don't over leverage ourselves with Bitcoin. But yeah, hopefully there's people learning that lesson at the moment, rather than exiting the entire space, because I know a lot of people did that in 2017 when I got into it. We bought pretty close to the top. Everyone was talking about crypto and Bitcoin in our social circles. I say ours, like my partner and I. And then throughout 2018, everyone kind of just backed away from it. It became this topic that like no one, ever speaks of. And it was only like me and her that continued to like learn, listen to things, try to figure out what this whole space is about, and just dollar cost average in. But there was a bunch of people that were like, no, I'm never touching this shit again. So anyone who's thinking that stuff now, I think just know that it will eventually recover. This is a great learning opportunity. So take the opportunity if you can.
Yeah, I think I went through that cycle as well, where it was when we were hanging around 10K, and it was 10K, it was 12K, it was 9K, it was 10K, and it was still this was like kind of I guess it was coming out of the bear market in 2018 or 19 or whatever it was, and it was, and I panic sold a couple of times. There still wasn't. I'd panic sell at 9, and then suddenly come back at 10, and everybody goes. I feel like everybody goes through that until you get the conviction, until you start doing the research, until you start working out what it is that Bitcoin is, but also what's happening in the world. And I love how Bitcoiners get this tendency to research and go down rabbit holes and learn. And it's like the other part of Bitcoin. It's like I was speaking to, so I have a little group of mates which we call the Meme Factory, and we have a podcast actually every Friday. But we were talking about it in there, and one of the guys there, his name's Yellow, ICO offender on Twitter. He was saying, he was doing this meme, and he was like, what about all these things that Bitcoiners learn about macroeconomics, micro, macro. You learn about the environment, you learn about agriculture, diet. Even these things that aren't related to finance, you just start diving down rabbit holes and learning. And I think I don't know what it is, if it's truth or what it is, truth seeking or whatever Bitcoin inspires in people, but you kind of have to have a bear market to start wondering, why is the price going down, what is happening in the in the economy, and you were talking earlier about other things that are going down, like stocks and bonds, and I've been thinking about this recently, and it's actually quite frustrating, the fact that you can't just store your value in money. You can't just, like, fiat money is something you can't store your value in, because it debases as they print more of it. So therefore you think, okay, well, I have to invest it, so I'll invest in stocks, and then but then you have what we're going through now, which is kind of basically a recession. They're probably not calling that yet, but
I
so
think
you
they
can't
said.
spend money.
I saw something where they said, "Oh, we're in a technical recession," which I think just means we're in a recession, but no one wants to call it a recession, so we're putting like a thing at the beginning of it that makes it sound less scary. It's technically a recession, but no one's feeling it yet, aren't they?
Yeah, it's just like this is like the transitory thing, right? Same
Yes,
thing.
exactly.
It's like it's so frustrating. So okay, so you try to store your money in stocks, and then that crashes. That crashes. All right, okay. Well, there goes those people. So so your money gets debased. Your stocks are crashing. You're even the right move is something like Bitcoin or gold, but gold is not doing that great. Gold is going flat for the however many years now, while we're getting in America things like 8.6 inflation prints. So it's like so Bitcoin should be the answer, but it's still being treated like a stock, like a tech stock, and so it's going down as well. So it's very frustrating that there's nothing in this world. Real estate's probably like it feels like one of the only things, but then of course real estate could have massive issues if they start raising the interest rates to try and save inflation, and then suddenly you've got this market of people that can't afford to pay off their loans, and so that could be a risk. There could be another housing crash. So it's
True.
It's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
I think when you do that analysis of what's the potential upside of some of these other asset classes, what's the potential, I guess, third-party risk is probably how I'll classify it, because where I'm thinking here is even things like property. There's a lot of talk, over in the US, and I've even heard out of Peritet in New South Wales, I think that's how you say his last name, talking about maybe we need to get rid of some taxes that kind of hit everyone, and we'll just kind of raise property taxes because that's the wealthy that own properties. So owning property to me seems like one of those risky things, just in the sense of, you're right, the market could go down in the first place, but then there's just like a lot of leverage over you essentially. Even if you own your property, like taxes could go up. You might need to do things that you might not need to with other assets just to keep holding it. Like, whereas Bitcoin, there is no maintenance cost on it. There is no extra tax they can put on it. And even if they do, that's incredibly difficult to enforce. Whereas something like a house or a property, it's very easy to enforce a tax on something like that. So when you start to look at all the pros and cons, the potential upside, the third-party risks, maintenance and holding costs, it just makes so much sense to come back to Bitcoin, really. And when we look at how much we want to try to simplify our lives, probably because they have become unnecessarily complicated with the sort of fiat fuckery that happens in the world. Yeah, Bitcoin it's a nice, simple solution. A lot of people don't get it yet. I think it's going to take a while for most people to really get it and for it to perform probably how it should. But yeah, in the meantime, I think Bitcoiners, they love doing that research. They love like seeking truth, I think is the way you put it, which is about right. Is trying to find out like why is all this stuff happening, and why is it happening now, and why does Bitcoin make a lot of sense, but still people don't seem to get it, or the price goes down from time to time. Like, you have to be comfortable with those fundamentals to stay in Bitcoin and to really get it.
Yeah, and I think it's just this latest cycle of now that it's coming down, you've got this latest cycle of people that are selling. You got the institutions that are selling. I was listening to some. We had a guy on our podcast recently, James Lavish, he calls himself a reformed hedge manager, hedge fund manager, and he was saying that basically the big institutions, now that they're it's almost like it was great when institutions came into Bitcoin. It was like, yes, institutions are here, the big money's here, and of course the price goes up. But it's also like there's the downside, that the fact that now they control the price because they're the ones with all this money that's gone in, and they can short it because they know that it's going to dump harder than stocks. It's like, because the world is still using it as a risk asset. So it's like, it's this the downside of all this institutional money is the fact that a recession's coming. They can push the price down by shorting it to hedge all of the other investments they've made, knowing that it's going to go down quicker. So it's like so it's a blessing and a curse, and then so what we have to rely on is that education of what Bitcoin is, and and people just doing what we do and stacking sats and staying humble, and that's why it's going to take a lot longer.
I think you're right. And exactly, like taking control of your own keys to stop Bitcoin being able to be, rehypothecated in sort of derivative type markets, which is, I think, what has really undone Celsius recently. But I guess the point there is that it's going to take a while, I think, for it to not be manipulated. And like, there's this like epiphany moment that we often have in life, isn't there, where you go through a bunch of shit and it doesn't seem to make sense at the time, but then you have an epiphany and you realize like, oh, I had to go through all of that to get to this point. And I think maybe like what's going on now, what's been going on, with Bitcoin over the 13 years of its life, the various ups and especially the downs, I think they're all leading to a bit of an epiphany moment where we realize like the hard yards that have been done have been the thing that will convince people that Bitcoin is actually the life raft. Enough people sort of losing their ass to either scams or rug pulls in other cryptocurrencies, or not taking, custody of their Bitcoin, or just trusting, fiat currency. Like, people will make those mistakes enough times until it becomes like so glaringly obvious that Bitcoin is where they should be. So I guess all of this stuff is leading to a bit of an epiphany moment for the world. I don't know when that'll be. I think sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, but I guess that's the good part of all this downside, is that inevitably it leads to some level of change, drastic level of change, in fact.
Yeah, let's hope so, because it just seems so stupid, because at the moment everybody is just piling into cash and it just makes no sense, right? It's like
Exactly.
it's almost like counterintuitive. We're printing, America is printing money out of thin air, like trillions and trillions of dollars, and everyone is just piling into cash. It makes zero sense, right? It's so stupid.
I think what most people are fighting about is, I was going to say, what most people are fighting about with that is like, what are we going to spend the cash on? It's like, that's the wrong problem to be thinking about. It's like, we should be fighting about, should we even be printing the money? But instead, what most people seem to be fighting about is, like, what do you do with it once the money's printed? Like, no, that's, Band-Aids rather than actual solutions.
Yeah. And this Celsius thing is just it's been kind of entertaining to watch. It's same with Luna. And Luna was probably more entertaining to watch because the price was still a little bit higher. But Celsius unwinding is just, I did a few graphics actually for a podcaster that had Alex Machinsky, whatever his name is. He, the CEO of Celsius, don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I did a couple of graphics with him. Yeah, okay. I did a few graphics with him in it for this podcaster. There was a few. It was like a little circle of guys for a podcast that another kind of reformed hedge fund manager. But I stopped doing graphics for them after a while. It was just becoming very, very shitcoin casino. But yeah, it definitely feels like the same story. It's like, they don't start out as Ponzi schemes, because they all start out with good intentions, and it all works in a bull market until things start to go south, literally, and then it's like, okay, well, that whole thing we were kind of that risk that they were taking suddenly doesn't start to pan out, and next minute there's halting of withdrawals, and what I find I'm kind of feel like I'm angry about is the fact that he's on Twitter telling everybody that everything's fine, and that and that withdrawals are working fine, and everyone should stop panicking, and there's all this FUD, and it's all just FUD, and it's not real. And then 24 hours later, there's literally an announcement from Celsius saying we're halting withdrawals, which he surely would have had to know about.
Of course, that would have been his call as well. And I love how they also phrased it as in the interests, in the best interests of the community, we have to freeze withdrawals. I think the community wants their Bitcoin, actually. They don't want you to freeze withdrawals at all.
Yeah, and it just kind of shows you that they, and they had come up with all these excuses, but really it's just they need the collateral so that they can hold on to their positions for as long as possible and pray. I've been really enjoying Corey Clipston, I think you say. Yeah. I've been really enjoying his stuff. I did a meme of him the other day. He was pointing out that he kind of looks like that guy from Die Hard in
Carl.
Die Hard. Yeah,
Die Hard
Carl. Yeah,
1.
so I
It
did
was
it.
Die Hard 1,
That's
yeah.
it. Yeah. I did a meme of him holding the gun to his head when and photoshopped Alex in there and him as Corey. So yeah, that was pretty funny. But he's just been kind of exposing it as it goes down, and of course probably Celsius will try and blame Corey for the whole collapse, but I don't think that's going to hold any validity. I think they obviously were in too deep with their leverage or risk, and it just kind of shows you that whenever you see something like a guaranteed yield on depositing funds, it's just like a red flag. So people need to see that. One thing I noticed that's different is I did a bit of research into the original Charles Ponzi scheme, and I don't know if you kind of looked into that story.
No, I haven't.
It's a kind of interesting story because it pretty much shows how all Ponzi schemes kind of happen. Is at the start he actually had a good idea. It was all about this idea about arbitraging the value of postage stamps. And I can't remember the exact details, but he did find this arbitrage. And what basically he had to do was go get all these postage stamps himself, go buy them for their actual worth, and then bring them back. I think it was bring it back to America, I think, and then he could sell them for 10 times their value. I can't remember how it worked, but it was something like that. He was using arbitrage on postage stamps, and it was a great idea. Ironically, he called his company the Security Exchange Company, or the SEC, which is super ironic.
Indeed.
But the one thing he did differently to a lot of these other guys is that when people started to get fearful that potentially it was a Ponzi scheme, he actually went out and started encouraging people to withdraw, and he went out into the crowds that were lining up out front of his store, wanting to sell the securities, and he was saying, "I'll buy them off you. I'll buy them off you. Everyone here is gonna." Is going to get their money back, and I'm happy to buy it off you, and maybe even at a premium. And everyone's like, oh, hang on, well, if he's so keen on getting the securities back and giving our money back, then maybe everything's fine. And so a lot of people, turned around and went home and didn't end up selling.
Bit of
And
reverse psychology.
Yeah, and but obviously different here. He's out in the town square telling people that everything's fine and please don't withdraw, and so it's, I guess, a little bit different. It's more begging people not to withdraw until eventually he closed the doors.
That's right. What kind of cracks me up is Alex Mashinsky's reason for people not withdrawing. He did a video, and I'm not sure if it's a really old video or he did it quite recently. I only saw it recently. But basically saying like, look, there's been several million, at least 1 million Bitcoin that's been lost. And it's because of this desire for people to hold their own keys and self-custody. And that's really not the way that we should be going. If you keep your Bitcoin with us, it'll be safe, essentially. Like, you won't risk losing it because, people keep losing their Bitcoin, and it's irresponsible to push this not your keys, not your coins narrative. Like, when people start making claims like that, to me, that should be the obvious red flag. That's the cracks are starting to really show. And that's, like you say, it's more like begging rather than saying, hey, look, if you want to take your Bitcoin away, sure, that's fine. In fact, we'll give you a parting gift, get out of here if you want. That would be, maybe convincing some people to stay. But instead, it just degraded to begging pretty quickly. Don't take your money. Please don't take it. In fact, you'll probably lose it if you take it. So keep it with us. It'll be safe here.
Yeah.
Famous last words.
Yeah, shitcoinery at its best. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I defend a lot of Michael Saylor stuff because I'm a bit biased because I do a bit of work for him, and so a lot of people have been saying, oh, when does Michael Saylor now get margin called or liquidated, or using all the words that are happening to all these other guys. But I mean, he's in obviously a better position. I think he said the other day that his leverage is like 1.05 or something times leverage. So, incredibly low. I think the price can go to $3,000, and he's still, all he has to do is just add a bit more collateral to hold on to things like his Silvergate loan, and otherwise he just keeps posting collateral. But I mean, there's still a risk, obviously. I mean, the price goes low enough and stays there long enough, and of course, there's going to be issues. But I'm a bit biased. I defend people like Michael Saylor because he set it up correctly. He's not leveraged in DeFi contracts and and I feel like that gets used as an excuse sometimes. I feel like, it was the smart contract. Someone exploited a smart contract, and and we've lost funds, and it's not our fault. And that's just, yeah, it's more shitcoinery kind of bullshit.
It's a cop out, isn't it? Because that's the due diligence that you would expect people to make before they make an investment. Like if they're using that to try to earn extra collateral or just to be the collateral in the first place, you would assume that it's they've done their due diligence. They're not going to put it into something that is hackable or exploitable or can be sort of shorted and just liquidated in that way. So I agree with you in terms of the way Michael Saylor has done it. Seems much more rational, much more conservative, really. And he still has a business that has incredible cash flows, so he can service loans. And I've got a similar understanding to you, where he's said in a recent podcast that exactly Bitcoin could go as low as 3,000 or 4,000, and all that would be required is that he needs to find more money to put into there. But that's not hard to find, so it's not an issue. He's just going to keep buying more. So I think anyone waiting for him to be margin called is probably going to keep waiting for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit trolling as well. I think, and especially everyone gets frustrated, and they want to see some sacrificial lambs. And we've had a couple now. We've had a couple of shitcoin sacrifices, which is always great to see. But it'd be pretty sad to. I mean, a lot of people would be in pain if the price went back to $3,000. I think
it'll be a very bittersweet moment, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there was a good meme the other day that one of the guys in the gang was talking about, and it's like we put on a brave face, and it's the meme where you've got the crying guy, but then there's like this kind of Chad mask that he's wearing, and he's like cheap sats, stack sats, and it's kind of like we'll be honest, it still hurts. It still hurts. It's like you have these plans, as your kind of store of value increases and your wealth over time increases with Bitcoin. You start to get plans, and then of course you have a bear market, and those plans get put on hold. As you wait for that cycle to play out. So it's still definitely painful. Most people like me are basically. All of my income is Bitcoin, so it's tough for me. It's certainly tough for me, in times like this. It always has been, but you just got to make sure you're sensible with it as you earn money. You've got to make sure you've got enough to live on. If you've got it all in Bitcoin, the whole get on zero meme that was going around is kind of not a great plan. Being 100% in Bitcoin is actually quite painful. You've got to have that money there to be able to live and not be forced to sell your Bitcoin. I think that's. I remember I used to tell people, you need to put all your money in Bitcoin, and everyone goes through this. You got to put all your money in Bitcoin. Don't everything else is going to get destroyed, and then of course you have that situation where it dips and you're forced to sell and at a loss in order to keep living. You've got to be sensible with it. But over the long term, I think the conviction doesn't change once you know enough about it.
No, it just becomes a matter of timing. And I'm very similar to you. I've got the majority in Bitcoin, but I keep enough to make sure I can service bills, service any debt that I have, and do that in the relative long term. So if there's a big drawdown in the Bitcoin price, that means I stack more. You're right. Some of those plans, the imagination of the future gets put on hold a little bit. But at the same time, it's a very bittersweet moment because there's cheaper Bitcoin to buy. But I think anyone who is fully into Bitcoin at that point, it becomes a very untenable situation if you've got bills to pay and then you have to start liquidating your Bitcoin just to cover that. Like, you don't want to be in that situation. So it's always good to, be a bit balanced with these sort of things. I think there will be a time, being on a Bitcoin standard and only having Bitcoin and only transacting in Bitcoin and earning in Bitcoin, etc., that'll make a whole lot of sense. It's just a matter of timing. And while I love to see people trying to do that now, I think going something like 80 or 90% into Bitcoin makes probably a whole lot more sense than 100%, just given especially the recent volatility.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And the other, yeah.
Sorry, you go.
Sorry, John.
Oh,
I was going to say yeah.
I was going to say, let's leave the Celsius thing and move on to something else, but no, I'll let you finish what you're going to say. I keep jumping in.
I was about to, I think we're on the same wavelength. I was about to say something different as well. I think now that we're talking about it, it's the other way to do it is superannuation. And I think I don't know if you've done much superannuation thought or research.
Yeah, I have a self-managed super fund that I set up about a year ago, and it's pretty much all in Bitcoin. I just recently finished my first audit and did a podcast recording and talked a bit about the audit process as well as just general queries and stuff. So yeah, I'm deep down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I went through a similar dive because as you talk to I talked to my superannuation company and I rang him up and I said, look, talk to me about what my money is invested in, and they said, oh, you're in the 1980s superannuation fund. And I was like, okay, all right, cool. Well, what's that?
What does that mean? Yeah,
it's a mix of things and stuff. Like you can't. We can't tell you exactly what it's invested in. We just, it's with some fund managers that have your, era of your life in mind as they invest. And I was like, well, okay, just give me what are we talking? Are we talking, can I know if I'm invested in tech stocks or commodities or any cash or what just nothing. Couldn't give me anything.
It's hard to say. That's not the answer you should get.
It's just it's impossible to get. And in one mind, I understand why. If everyone knew exactly what they were invested in, and if everyone that was invested in superannuation was given like a report of each week or each month about what their money's invested in, I can understand that would be probably pretty full on because for one thing, everyone would be like, why did you put me into this stock that was in the news this week that said it was crashing? And so I get it that the phone would be ringing off the hook if everybody knew exactly what they were invested in. But at the same time, if you wanted to, you should be able to know where this money that you're forced in Australia to save in and pump the stock market, you should be able to know, just whereabouts or have some sort. And there are super funds that allow you to kind of chop and change a little bit and add allocations to certain things, but those certain things are pretty vague. They just kind of have these pools of capital that have these brands that are that still you can't really work out what they're doing with the money or what specifically they're putting it into. So they said to me, if you like, we can spend like an hour and talk through your risk profile and your lifestyle and what you are into, and we can come up with potentially a better way to invest your super. And I was like, you know what, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. So we did that, and it went through an hour of lots of questions, some pretty funny questions about what's your risk tolerance and things like that. Asking a Bitcoiner what their risk tolerance is a pretty funny question. But yeah, and then got to the end, and she was like, okay, well, I realized that you're probably in the kind of more of the high growth because you have a high risk tolerance, so high growth. So we're going to put you. We would suggest putting you in like a high growth fund or something like that. And you say, okay, amazing. What's that? Well, it's more indexes and etc. And I was like, okay, like what? Okay, well, I know what indexes are. Like, are we like Nasdaq, S&P, those type of things? And what indexes? Oh, well, we can't tell you. And it's like you've just wasted like an hour of my time and tell me that they're going to put me in more things that they can't tell me what they are. So it was pretty obvious that I just needed to do it myself. So yeah, I went down the same rabbit hole and they said something like, superannuation companies are probably thinking about having Bitcoin as a potential investment asset in maybe the next 5 years. And I was finding that really hard to believe because it's almost like the best use case is to store your value for retirement. It's the best use case. It should be the number one thing that superannuations offer, not something that they're not willing to even discuss or think about. So so it's pretty. Yeah, so I did the same thing. Started up the superannuation self-managed superannuation fund, and I haven't got 100% in. Otherwise, my wife would probably shoot me. But I'm,
That's fair.
but I would say majority of it is in Bitcoin and Bitcoin related. So yeah.
But it's just nice to have that flexibility, isn't it? Like if it comes to a point where then your wife says, "Oh, okay, I understand this, and I agree with all the projections that you have in mind. Let's go all in on Bitcoin." At least you could do that, even just with the super fund. Whereas if it was with someone else being managed, even if you and your wife both agreed to do that, you wouldn't be able to. Or if you did, there would be delays in getting it. Would you be able to self-custody it? There's all those sort of steps, all those barriers essentially that are there. So just having the freedom to put what you want into your super, whether you have it all in Bitcoin or whatever else, that flexibility, that freedom is, well, exactly what we should have with our retirement savings, essentially. Now that I'm with it, like have a self-managed super fund, it kind of seems crazy that I've only done it at this point in life. Like this seems to be something that I should have done maybe almost like 15, 20 years ago, as soon as I had a super fund in the first place. Although having said that, I didn't know shit about anything that I'm doing now. So maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind to be doing that back then. But still, if I knew that I had control over it, maybe I would have taken it a bit more seriously. Maybe I would have learned these things a bit quicker.
Yeah, I think once you've learned about markets, and that's the one thing about Bitcoin that teaches you about markets, and it teaches you about macroeconomics and what money is and how money works, and once you start going down the rabbit hole, that is, and I'm okay with the timing, and I think in hindsight you'll probably be okay. If I went into my self-managed super fund a lot earlier, I think I would have made some silly mistakes. And they're all the mistakes that we made when we joined Bitcoin and played around with stupid stuff.
True.
It's the same. So probably it's a good time to do self-managed super fund after you've gone down that rabbit hole journey. I would recommend. I would recommend it for most people, but most people that actually understand how it's all working or have some grasp of how it's all working, because it's just a shitstorm out there at the moment. It's this dance that you have to play between cash and equities and commodities, and it just seems ridiculous that we can't just store our wealth in money in inverted commas.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when you go back to what money is, it just makes so much sense to have this one vehicle that can hold your wealth, and you don't need to be an expert in stocks or bonds or properties or any market really, or geopolitics or macroeconomic. Like, you don't need to know any of those things. You just have this money that lets you specialize, do the thing that you're good at, and store your wealth. The fact that we do at the moment need to know about all these other things is just, it's not what money was meant to bring. Money was meant to simplify things, to remove the barter system, and to help specialization. But instead, because we have 160 odd currencies and a bunch of other assets that are kind of competing for people's attention, it's very complicated. And I kind of agree with you there. Like if I had set up a self-managed super fund earlier, it might not be worth very much at the moment. Whereas setting it up now, where I have the conviction and understand the fundamentals, that is a much better time to have done it. Well, I'm curious,
how, I think so.
Like, because you got into Bitcoin in 2017, which is around the same time as me. Like, what was it that got you into it? Like, was there anything that primed you earlier in life that made it make more sense, or was it just, seeing it and spending time on it? Yeah, what was your journey?
Yeah, I was pretty fit back in the day. I was I had a think looking back at it now. I mean, I studied industrial design, and I used to, because I loved art design, and during school and growing up, and so that's the kind of field that I wanted to get into. Looked into architecture, and industrial design was the thing that grasped me, which is kind of ironic now that I'm a Bitcoiner, because I think about back then I used to think, you know what, when I leave this industrial design degree, I'm going to, apply for jobs at, Sunbeam and all these kind of companies and start designing, toasters and phones and, cars. And, this is kind of the dream of an industrial designer. Industrial design is like product design. And so, but thinking about it now, it's like, wow, that's like the height of Fiat really is pump out junk, destroy resources, pump out junk, and just and just spend money. And and so I went through a big phase there. Eventually I got into I actually ended up in the exhibition industry, which was quite fun. It was so I was designing custom stands. So that's where I did some 3D modeling, and then I got quite into that. So I joined an exhibition company and then designed custom stands for big trade shows and events all around the world, and then eventually more in project management side, and that was great. I enjoyed that. The way that it kind of transitioned from there was, graphics has always been a passion, and I was more doing kind of the meme style graphics. My style of graphics is more, I love doing the realistic stuff. I love doing stuff that people are like, wait a second, that's crazy. That's not like the cutout head stick on the body kind of memes. I really enjoy doing the stuff that looks realistic, and people are like, whoa, is that real? And so I was doing it. I was just doing it for fun, for friends, and I was doing it for work as well, just doing their graphics and coming up with concepts for exhibition stands, but then when I got into, and it was just a friend really that suggested it. He works for one of the big exchanges in Australia, and he got me into it. He was like, dude, you seriously have to check this out, and you have to learn more. It's going to be incredible. And so I went on that journey of start you start just buying it, and you don't really care about it too much. You just buy it because you know that the number goes up. And then it wasn't until it started to go down that I started to look into. I was like, why is it going down? Why is the price of Bitcoin going down? I thought this was like going up forever. And that's when I started learning some technical analysis and how markets work. And I came across Tone Vays, who's one of the OGs of Bitcoin. And he's been a Bitcoin maximalist for a very long time. He's been shitting on shitcoins for numerous years. And I used to watch him, or I still do, watch his podcast a lot, and about TA, and eventually I met up with him, and he put out a tweet one day where he wanted a new profile picture, and he put this brief together and put it on Twitter, and I was like, man, I follow this guy. It'd be pretty cool to do some work for him. So I just posted I just emailed him a photo and said, hey, this is what I think would look cool with what you said. And in my normal kind of realistic looking style, and he came back, and I didn't think he was going to respond, but he came back and he said, man, this is the best thing that I've received so far. Would you be able to do some more work for me? And then it just kicked off, and for up until recently, basically I've been doing all of his conference work, all of his website, all of his YouTube thumbnails. A lot of his TA instructional manuals are designed up, in collaboration with him. He runs Unconfiscatable Conference and Understanding Bitcoin, and the Financial Summit. I just started doing all of that, and it was like I was having two jobs, because I was working full time, but then I was just trying to get all these thumbnails done and all this work done. And eventually it was actually just before the pandemic. I had to kind of make a decision. I was just about to have my second kid, and had to make a decision to kind of pick one or the other, because it was just taking up too much of my time. And so I decided to go full time in graphics, and so I started up my own company in 2000. I think it was 2019, end of 2019, just before the pandemic, and it ended up being quite ironic, because I was I said to my company at the time, hey, can I look? I'm about to have my second kid. Can I go to 4 days? Maybe travel a little bit less. I was going to Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong and all these kind of places all around the world to do these exhibitions, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And they said, no, we need you 5 days a week in the office, and we need you to travel with your work. And so I just had to make the call, and I had to leave and start up my business full time. And that's when I went full time Bitcoin graphics, basically, and mainly for Tone Vays, but then just started branching out with new people as they saw work and they just requests and um, Michael Saylor and pretty much a lot of the guys, a lot of the people and OGs in Bitcoin have had my graphics at some point, which has been really fun. It's definitely a passion, and I've been able to do it because I've saved my wealth and my savings in Bitcoin, and that's allowed me to kind of accelerate into this business and do what I love, while still supporting the family. So I guess that's something that Bitcoin brings in the long term, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gives a bit more security to make a decision like that, which maybe if Bitcoin wasn't around or you hadn't done that kind of proof of work to demonstrate that you can get that work in the Bitcoin industry, maybe that's not a decision you would have made. Like, it does enable a lot of those things. And I feel like I've got kind of a similar trajectory in terms of my change in career, but doing so with kind of a bit of safety net with Bitcoin, but also Bitcoin as a thing to focus on, to contribute to. It just makes for a more flexible and free life, but also a life that I think Bitcoiners are more passionate about if they get to actually work in the industry. And so, yeah, I'm really glad to hear that journey. And that's kind of just proof of work, isn't it? You're interested in something, you dabble a bit, it takes up time, extra time, because you're already working another job, you've got a family, but you decide, look, there's something here, or this is just, it's scratching an itch that I have, so I'll keep putting in the work. And then before you know it, you're kind of discovered by someone that says, oh, this is really great work, actually, I want to give you more. And then before you know it, you've got other people approaching you about it, and you can make the decision of saying, well, I'm just going to get rid of my job and I'll do this instead. Like, that's not just what Bitcoin enables, but I guess proof of work, being productive, kind of taking a bit of a risk with your time and saying, well, I'll sacrifice an opportunity somewhere else to just get better at this thing, to network a bit more, to spend time on projects that I might not get paid for or might not get recognized for, but you do enough of that, consistency and time being the secret ingredients. It's just beautiful to end up then having more freedom and flexibility and doing something that you're passionate about.
It definitely allows you to do what you love. Depending on there's lots of stories of people quitting their jobs at the top of the market, and then obviously the meme of getting a job at Macca's when it starts to come back down again. But some of the time, yeah, people get to do what they love, and I love that that's changing the world. It's changing what we do. It's rather than going in these fiat jobs that are just rat race and just be strangled. You can actually do something that you enjoy while still contributing to society, and save your wealth. It's like the perfect formula, and I think that could really help society. The whole Bitcoiner mentality can help society kind of evolve to the next level, rather than keep going on this destroy resources and just keep pumping out the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there. I'm curious, how did the Michael Saylor image come about? Because that's very iconic now. And is that, in fact, one of the ways that I came across you? Because I think you might have posted it, and it might have been an update to it, or maybe just sort of reposting it. But it was like, I kind of recognized the photo, obviously, but then clicked through your name. I was like, this dude's from Australia. You've got to get him on the podcast, had a look at the website. And I had no idea that had come from you. But yes, I'm curious, how did that one come about?
Yeah, that was a fun one. That's one of those things you were talking about just before, about sometimes you just do something because you're passionate about it. We're not necessarily thinking about getting a return on that investment in time. And it was my art comes around a lot. A lot of my art actually comes just from getting inspired by something I see. Someone will write something on Twitter, and I'll just I'll get inspiration, and I have this picture in my mind about what this graphic could look like that sums up that tweet or that message, and I just can't put the pen down until I can't put my computer down until I finish this graphic. Like I just get really passionate about it. And it was one of those times. It was he put a tweet out, and I can't even remember what the tweet was, but it really inspired me. And I was like, what, I'm just going to do a Michael Saylor graphic, and I'll put it. And he probably won't see it. He's got millions of followers or whatever, but I'll just do a graphic. And the original graphic I did was a kind of he ended up using it as a tweet about Christopher Columbus and a quote from Christopher Columbus relating to Bitcoin. And but it was kind of like a sailing captain sitting at a desk with a map in front of him, this kind of Bitcoin journey that we go on into the unknown. And it had it had books next to him piled up with a couple of the the things he used to do with his engineering degrees and was it aerospace engineering and also the book. I think he wrote a book, The Mobile Wave, and so I had a few of those things in the image, and he talked about how the dragon of the Bitcoin dragon will consume the city of gold, and so I had this dragon in the background and the windows in the back, breathing fire, and then I had the ship that he has behind him in the podcasts. Sometimes had that ship out the window. It's like a Dutch galleon. And I posted it on Twitter, and I didn't think much of it. It was just more of one of those pieces that I just had to do and complete and put out there. And he saw it, and he messaged, and out of the blue, he messaged me and just said, "This is great." And he used it as a tweet, and then he said, "Can you do some more stuff for me?" And he just started giving me some of the thoughts that he was thinking about Bitcoin, and if anything kind of inspired me, I'd do a graphic, and then he'd post it with the graphic. So yeah, we did that for a little while. It was really fun. I always get starstruck with stuff like that. I've always had that kind of starstruck vibe, which is so that was really fun. I get a lot of enjoyment out of stuff like that. So but yeah, he paid me for it all. Of course, he didn't pay me in Bitcoin because he'd probably get mobbed if he found out that he was spending his Bitcoin. So, but yeah, and still occasionally he and I spoke to him the other day, and he said, I think the world needs some more Bitcoin art. So I'm coming up with some stuff at the moment. So yeah, that's how that one came around, and then his profile picture. What I love about the profile picture is that anytime a news article or someone does a meme or something like that, they usually use his profile picture. So I get to see my art kind of popping in and out of everyone else's work, so which is kind of fun. I enjoy that.
Definitely. Yeah, that must be, I guess probably not now, but maybe a surreal feeling when it first happens. You like stumble across an article online somewhere and like, hey, shit, that's my work.
Yeah, with Tone Vays stuff, that was, I remember at the start, it was pretty amazing. I used to, see it everywhere, and people would quote his articles and would quote his YouTube videos, and there'd be my thumbnail, and I've done so, I don't know, I must have done hundreds and hundreds of thumbnails for Tone Vays. I've done some really cool stuff. One of my favorite ones was he did back in the block wars. There was the fight between, I think it was actually the start of the fight between BSV and Bitcoin Cash, and when that kind of split started to happen, and there was this kind of Mexican standoff between was it Jihan Wu and Calvin Ayre and Fake Toshi and all these kind of BSV shitcoiner Bitcoin Cash Roger Ver, and so I did this artwork for Tone of this Mexican standoff and had all of them all pointing guns at each other. It was one of the ones I spent I think I must have spent 6 to 8 hours on this graphic. It was pretty epic. So I've done some cool stuff like that. I look back and see some stuff like that I've done that I quite enjoy. I still post it occasionally, some flashbacks to some of the stuff I've done in the past. But I mean, it comes back to the memes and art, and just kind of it's different to words and tweets. Kind of it inspires people's thoughts, and I like that. I like the fact that art and memes, kind of have that different effect.
They do. It's much more. I'm not sure of the word. I mean, like salient. It grabs our attention a lot more, and it can convey so much complexity and irony sometimes in the world. Whereas to read, a 10-minute or a 20-minute article that goes into that same level of depth, most people don't have time for that. And you kind of receive the message in much different of a way and much less memorable of a way sometimes when it's a wall of text. But images, especially memes, that kind of convey complexity and absurdity as what it actually is. Those are very profound. Very I think our brain has a lot of trouble going past it because it hits home. It's very true. And of course, being like eye catching and everything else certainly helps for us to give it a bit of time.
Yeah, it's like I guess it's more of that inspirational feeling that you get when you look at a graphic and it kind of clicks with you. I have a lot of fun with the Meme Factory guys. I don't know are you familiar with the Meme Factory?
Vaguely familiar, but not something that I know a whole lot about.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I noticed when talking to Bitcoiners is that every Bitcoiner is kind of in their own little Bitcoin bubble. There's like these little segments of Bitcoin. So there's some definitely, there's obviously a whole heap of well-known Bitcoiners that everyone's across, and then these kind of little pockets. I was speaking to some of my mates who are Bitcoiners here in Sydney, and they had no idea who these Meme Factory guys are, or Greg, or but I'm like, the meme, fuck
I'm
you,
aware
Greg.
of Greg. Fuck you, Greg,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
No, I'm
yeah.
aware of Greg, yeah. And Yellow, yeah.
Yeah, and he had no idea what I was talking about, and so I think it's weird, but I have a lot of fun with those guys now. I just interacted with them a bunch of times, and joking around with them. Eventually, I did a podcast with them, and then they invited me to kind of officially join the Meme Factory, which of course doesn't exist. And so I've been having so much fun with them. They keep it real, and they keep the fun, which is great. Which is humor and things is kind of what you need in markets like this, as we dip under 21K US Bitcoin.
I know. Is that what we're at the moment? I haven't really been paying attention to it.
Yeah,
Not this morning, at least.
We're into the 20s now, just under 21,000.
Well, yeah, humor will go a long way.
Yeah, we'll definitely need it. Some people will definitely be hurting if they've over leveraged positions or things like that. I'm sure there'll be definitely some pain out there right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we always tell people at especially like the local meetup or even the work that I do with Hard Block, and of course even in this podcast is, hold your own keys, get it off the exchange, don't leverage. But invariably there'll be people that contact and say, yeah, I know that's the story. That's that's what we should do. But what about this thing? This seems like a really good opportunity. Or we've had people at the local meetup recently. I can't recall if it was Celsius or BlockFi or one of the other ones, but it sounded like they have like quite a large position that's leveraged in something like Celsius. But it's just, no matter how consistent you are with the message, people still kind of dabble and do other things. So I think there's going to be plenty of pain at the moment.
Yeah, I think that greed factor just kind of it just keeps tapping on the door.
Definitely, and especially I think because there is all that psychology of people feeling like they've missed out. So it's like the only way I can catch up now is with multiples of leverage, or finding another coin that's going to do just as well. But it's it's a trap. It's a trap. But again, you got to touch the stove to realize that it's hot. I'm curious, like with your website, which is worldofrusty.com. Like I've had a look over that. I think there's some brilliant designs on there, both in terms of like merch, so clothing, as well as I don't know what you would call it officially, but like wall art, things that you would actually hang somewhere, and it's a piece of art that you put on the wall. What's your what's your intention with it? Is it just to keep kind of filling out more and more designs? Do you have other ideas in mind, or other services that you provide that you want to spruik? Like, can people contact you, for example, and get a profile picture made, or do you freelance work like that, or are you pretty much full up with those sort of things now?
Yeah, that's actually the work I enjoy the most. I did a recent one for a guy on Twitter, Bodog, I think his name is.
Yeah, yep.
It was a really
I'm
cool.
familiar.
Yeah, it was a really cool artwork I did for him recently. He came to me. Usually what happens is Michael Saylor will tweet out one of my pieces or something, or use some art that I did, and my notifications will blow up for about a week. And that's always like, I really enjoy that. It's like best part is when I go through a situation like that, and then I usually get a huge bunch of requests. And but yeah, the stuff where I get like Bodog just said, hey, just want a new profile pic and a new banner, and I've got this idea, and it gives me a bit of a brief. He wanted a Labrador in a kind of a gentleman's lounge, with this Bitcoin kind of cigar bar kind of lounge look. And so I came up with an artwork for him, and that's probably the stuff I enjoy the most, to be honest. I love those requests. I love requests for the profile pictures, and sometimes I like the surprise of it. Sometimes someone randomly will say, "Hey, can I get laser eyes?" To just and I'll see it on someone else's post, and I'll just go spend like a stupid amount of time on it or something, and kind of surprise them with it and drop it in there. And it'll kind of blow their mind. I'm like, holy crap, this is insane. And that's just, I really enjoy that. That's I get a lot of buzz out of doing stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoy requests. So yeah, I just send me a DM. If anyone wants some art. My website, yeah, I just had during that time where my work was going around, where Michael Saylor was posting a fair bit of it. People were putting a lot of requests out. Hey, where can I get this on? So I can put it on my wall, or I need some Bitcoin art, and so yeah, I just finally got around to doing it. So the idea is that I'll kind of expand the collection there, and you can just buy it anywhere. It's just printed to canvas, a nice kind of stretched canvas print, and there's some subtle ones or some a bit more full-on ones, and so you can kind of pick. But and just shirts and some fun stuff. I'm trying to be a little bit different with what I'm putting up there. I want to try and find some kind of clever stuff. Zip hoodies with some designs maybe that have something on either side of the zip, or I'm trying to be a little bit more clever rather than just kind of pump out some shirt designs. But just a bit more of fun. People that like my work, and want to grab a piece can do that. So that's the intention there. But yeah, most of my work comes from work. Yeah, most of my work just comes from word of mouth. I get just random people all the time saying, "Hey, can you do a thumbnail for me for this? I've got this interview coming up." Doing some work for Bitcoin Magazine. That's that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's the kind of bread and butter. So yeah, for sure.
Has there been any challenges with making this transition? Because it sounds like, and this would have been the hard work that you put in, the consistency, of course, that you've got a lot of traction, from people making those kind of ad hoc or random requests, as well as it sounds like some more kind of consistent or reliable work that you can fall back on there as well. But yeah, I'm curious, has it been a smooth ride as kind of what it sounds like in my mind, or have there been challenges along the way that have made you, maybe not reconsider entirely, but have a moment of going like, oh shit, this is harder than what I thought?
Yeah, no, definitely there's some challenges, 100%. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is being the fact that most of my income is in Bitcoin. I have to sell Bitcoin, and this is a dirty word, but I have to sell Bitcoin in order to pay my bills and buy groceries and things like that. And there are Bitcoin credit cards and things like that, but basically it's the same thing.
They all work on a similar basis. Yeah.
Yeah, you're turning Bitcoin into value, which you're exchanging for items that I need to live. So yeah, for sure. When I might be earning Bitcoin, very very hard to sell Bitcoin, especially when you have the Bitcoin maximalist mentality. Selling Bitcoin is a very dirty feeling. Um, so the challenges would be, you've got that urge to keep it all in Bitcoin for as long as possible, only to find that you're probably better off maybe selling it when you get it, when you need the money to spend. I guess that's probably the main challenge I have. I'd probably recommend that anyone that kind of is in the Bitcoin circular economy, to, if you do need to have, that local fiat money in order to pay for your bills. It's so that's one of the major challenges, is kind of just making sure that you're not too overexposed to the volatility in the short term. Um, that makes family life a bit hard. It makes you put things on hold. Looking to do some renovations, but then deciding, okay, well, now we have to wait for a potentially block height 840,000
Yeah,
until we do that renovation.
it's true.
So well, they're the biggest challenges, I'd say.
That makes a lot of sense. It's really hard finding that balance, and dealing with the emotion that you feel when it comes time to sell Bitcoin. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. We've all got bills to pay, and regardless of whether you're paying for it in Bitcoin, converting it to fiat by selling it, or having like a Bitcoin type credit card, which just sort of does that for you on the fly. I mean, the point is those things need to be paid, don't they? And that's, I guess, a way to look at it that can sometimes make that a bit easier is, you can still dollar cost average. So you get paid in Bitcoin. Some of that then gets converted back to fiat to pay bills. And the remainder stays in Bitcoin, which is more or less like your dollar cost average contribution, similar to if you were paid in fiat. You kept some of that fiat for bills and then you put the rest in Bitcoin. It's kind of a similar thing, but emotionally feels quite different because you have the Bitcoin there. You don't have to then go and buy the
Yeah.
amount that you want. You have it there, and then it's now you have to sell some. So, yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's more of just like a mindset thing and embracing it and knowing that it's not perfect, but you got to be not
I
always
mean,
conservative, but
I
balanced.
kind of, yeah, and I kind of see it. It's almost like dollar cost averaging into fiat currency, which is when you're in the Bitcoin world, and you live on a Bitcoin standard, it's kind of, yeah, you're kind of dollar averaging into fiat currency to pay bills,
Yeah,
which is a weird reverse concept. And it also means that you have to try and get more work in a bear market to make up for it, which is counterproductive because most people don't want to spend money in a bear market. So yeah, it definitely times get harder in like times like this. But we just you just keep getting doing as much work as you can, and like everybody, and waiting for the inevitable, next rise of Bitcoin.
that's it. And again, like time and secret ingredients, sorry, time and consistency being like the secret ingredients to any kind of success, really. I'm curious, we know this, but many people in your life might not know this. So, what have like family and friends' reactions been to you leaving what they might see as like a more stable or reliable job and then sort of focusing in with Bitcoin, especially times like now when the price goes down? Like, do you have people contacting you from time to time, like going, shouldn't have done that, or how are you feeling about this, or do you want to come back and work for me or do this other thing instead? Like, does that sort of stuff happen at all?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, my family's pretty good. They're pretty supportive of whatever. I mean, as parents are. So that they're glad that I'm doing what I enjoy. Um, but yeah, it's I guess the more tough part is living on the Bitcoin standard. That's more of the contentious point, because as a Bitcoiner, you want to convert everyone around you to a Bitcoiner because it makes so much more sense when you learn about it, and that becomes more of the contention point rather than what I'm doing for a living. Um, so I get a lot of people that contact me during times like this, and like, are you? I heard about some crash or something. Like, what? Are you okay? Or and you have to kind of explain, or I'll get my parents calling me up sometimes and say, I heard that. there's a scam, there's a Bitcoin scam going around, where, and I just, and it just, yeah, and sometimes it's frustrating, you have to explain that Bitcoin, the scam has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Um, there's constant scammers in every industry, and fiat and Bitcoin, and it's nothing to do with Bitcoin itself. They're just using that in this particular story, or to get the value out of you. But but yeah, that's probably the hardest point. My parents asked me, "You're not too much invested in this thing." And as a Bitcoiner, you don't see it as an investment. You see it as like
Well, this
a
is money.
change. Yeah, exactly. You see it as a change in the way you see money. Family, most of my friends are kind of Bitcoiners. Some of them still shitcoiners, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, family, definitely, that's the hardest one, because they still see it as well, you sold some for profit, right? When the price was 60,000. And yeah, that's always the tough one to contend with. And my thinking about it has changed a lot with when I tell people about it. I try not to dive into. I mean, I have this theory that if you're in Bitcoin long enough, eventually you turn into a Max Keiser personality, because it's like he's the final form of a Bitcoiner.
I hope you're
Uh,
right. That'll be a great world to live in.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you start to, the more and more you learn about what it is and how beautiful the design of the system is, and the incentives, and the way it changes you as a person, and the way it can change society, and all these big concepts which you learn slowly over time. You can't go to a normie and just dump all of this on them, because they just look at you like a crazy person. So
Yeah.
anytime someone says to me that Max Keiser is a crazy person, I just say to them, no, you just haven't been in Bitcoin long enough. Um, so you kind of have to let people go on that journey themselves, get skin in the game. Watch it go down. Play around with what you need to play around with, and then learn, and then start to learn, and that's what creates the Bitcoiner. And yeah, that's what I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that once you're a Bitcoiner, you don't go back. I don't. Not many people go down the rabbit hole as much as we do, and then just go, you know what? Actually, this is all bullshit. I'm going back to fiat, because we know too much now. It's like you kind of know too much about what's happening in the world to just. It's like once you're out of the matrix, you can't go back. It's just that same thing.
Exactly right. And just a one-way street. It's a gradual trickle, but it continues. And a lot of things that you said there resonated with me. In fact, even the quote from your parents, I think I heard that just a couple of weeks ago from mine, to say, like, you're not too invested, are you? Like, what if there's a rug pull? Maybe you should sell some. It's like, I'm not even going to tell them how much of it invested, in quotations, because it's not an investment, it's money. You just want to hold it. It's better. And even, most of my normie friends or family will think I'm crazy already with the small amount that I talk about Bitcoin now, because I've sort of reached a point where I don't want to convince anymore. I don't have the time or the effort to do that. There's other more productive things I could be doing. But if I talk to them how I really wanted to talk to them about Bitcoin, they would absolutely think that I'm crazy. It's like levels of, orders of magnitude beyond where the craziness is at the moment that they perceive me as. And so I think you're right.
Yeah.
The Max Keiser being the final form. Well, you'll get there, because it's such a, like a spiritual connection is probably not the right word, but that's kind of what it feels like with things like Bitcoin. I think like
it is. I think spiritual is a good word, not in the religious sense.
That's
but,
right.
but
Yeah.
in that it's this incredible system that, and as I said before, like the incentives and the alignment of everybody working together, for themselves, but also it helps the community. It's like you can be a selfish Bitcoiner and still help the Bitcoin community.
Yeah.
Miners are basically a selfish entity in themselves, but they're the ones that secure the network for us. So it's like it's the everything aligns, and it's beautiful, and it's beautiful to watch.
I think
Um,
a big part of it is like distributed systems and open source systems, whether it's software or some other way of functioning. And it's not something that the world has seen kind of en masse, whereas people that have worked in like free open source software development like Linux or some of the kind of larger projects over the last sort of 20, 30 years, they would understand it. They would understand you can't shut these things down once it's distributed, like the BitTorrent protocol, for example. It just has this level of traction where it doesn't ever go back. It only ever grows, especially if it has some level of utility and security. And if it's free and available that you can modify and work on yourself, exactly, people can be doing things selfishly to build their own thing, but then the entire ecosystem benefits from it. And that is such a profoundly different way of doing advances in technology or getting people involved than what we've done in the past, where it all focuses on like centralized, proprietary, secretive kind of systems and very fractured and kind of like everyone doing their own sort of siloed thing. So it's just such a different way of viewing the world. And obviously, like Bitcoin is all those things. It's a distributed system. It's decentralized. It is free and open source. And I think, yeah, once other people start to grok it, it'll have that same profound kind of spiritual impact on them. Not to mention all the stuff about philosophy and economics and monetary history that makes people kind of aware of what's been going on in the world and therefore why we need to change some of these systems, or maybe not change it, but just create a new one. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and the systems we have in place at the moment are kind of opposite. You look at something like gold, and I heard an argument against gold on one of the. Actually, I did the thumbnail for the. There was uh, an argument, or sorry, a debate between Michael Saylor and Frank Goostra
Mm-hmm.
about gold, and I did the thumbnail for it, which in the end Frank Goostra vetoed on the official YouTube site, and so Michael Saylor ended up just using it on to promote the debate on Twitter.
Mm.
There was a good argument. The fact that in say, for instance, gold, the miners of gold in total stark opposite to Bitcoin, obviously they're also running a selfish situation where they're trying to get as much gold out of the ground as possible. In most cases, they're getting the gold so that they can sell it for fiat. They're not holding the gold themselves, and they might hold some more, um, but most of the time they're just selling it. And if the gold price goes up, they can ramp up production and to be able to sell more gold at the higher price, which is counterproductive to the gold industry. The gold bugs and the people that hold gold for store of value want the price to go up, but if the price goes up and then gold miners are suddenly incentivized to mine more at a higher cost, and effectively selling at the higher cost, which is pushing the price down. It's like it's counterproductive
Absolutely.
to a gold holder. So, and I mean, and then the fiat system. Well, I mean, that's completely corrupt. I mean, they have a money printer, and if they need to win an election or they need to make some people happy, they just start a new program and fund it with money that they can print out of thin air, and justify it on because of what they perceive is good reasons to the public, with no. So I mean, so all the systems we have are selfishly driven to the detriment of the holders, whereas the Bitcoin system is just beautiful. One of my favorite quotes from Jack Mallers, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but he was basically making the point that you can get on the Bitcoin system now. I got to look up the quote. Maybe you can comment on that while I try and look up the quote from Jack Mallers. But
No worries. Yeah, I'm not sure of the one that you're talking about, but yeah, he's got a lot of ones.
yeah, my point was that the every other system we have in the world, the selfish incentives outweigh the contribution to society.
Yeah, like the last I don't want to take this to a highly political topic, but the last couple of years, I think, has shown people in terms of like our health system, our healthcare system, the way that the incentives are quite misaligned in that. Not to, even go down the rabbit hole of like food and agriculture, just a lot of these, if you look at it from like a systems engineering perspective, you would think immediately, this is broken, this is not going to work. We're eventually going to triangulate on this really unproductive outcome or this counterproductive outcome because of the way that the incentives are structured. And when you look back at money, that is very much kind of rife through those systems as well. Like you just said with, fiat currency. And I mentioned before, like the main argument they have is not like, do we print more? It's like, what do we spend it on once we print it? So it's like the incentives are all broken. The conversation will never come up in the fiat system of like, maybe we should print less. But I think Bitcoin,
the incentives aren't there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I found the quote from Jack Mallers. So he said, this is on one of his amazing rants. He said, new participants, and he's talking about Bitcoin. So new participants are additive. So when they do come into the network, they make everything that's already on it stronger. So you can either join and make me better, or you can resist it and die. But either way, I win, so I don't give a fuck. That was one of my favorite. It was one of my favorite. Love it. And it was the point that you can every person that joins the Bitcoin network, adds value to it in whatever way, shape, or form that they join the network. You can join now, or you can go and die in fiat world with that crushing system. But either way, Bitcoiners win.
Exactly.
I thought that was beautiful. Yeah.
It reminds me of the everyone buys Bitcoin at the price they deserve quote. I have no idea who to attribute that to, but that's floated around for a while. But it's very similar, isn't it? It's like you'll either buy it now or you'll buy it later, or maybe you won't at all. But still, that's kind of some level of buying it. You're just shorting it instead. But everyone buys at the price that they deserve.
Yeah, and it's very true, and I love the philosophy behind that, because it's the people that need it the most are the people that get in first. Are usually the poorer people, or the people that need it out of necessity to save themselves from inflation, or because they not banked and they need a way to transact with the world, or people like that. Whereas a lot of the kind of people closer to the money printer, obviously they don't need it, so they don't care. They just shit on it and continue to do what they do. But eventually, once we do transition, well, they realize that they do actually need to join the network. I love that philosophy of the fact that it does mean that there will be an equality factor to the adoption of Bitcoin. There will be this kind of organic, by just almost by design, transfer of wealth and equality, which is great. A lot of people talk about, one of the FUD topics on Bitcoin is that Bitcoin doesn't promote equality, and that it'll only help the people that got in early, like a pyramid scheme. But they don't. That's really, it's only just like touching the surface with, it's like that. It's such a silly way to think about it. The people that got in early will benefit the most, but they will also distribute their Bitcoin to the next generation. Meanwhile, those people that need it the most, the poorer that they will get their power back. It's a way to kind of get that power back that they never had a chance of getting, both in their in their control of the world and themselves and what they can do in life, and also their wealth. I think that's a beautiful concept.
And it's the people that got in early that took the most risk. So it would make sense that they get the most highly rewarded too. So that doesn't even seem broken. I think money always ends up being hierarchical in some way in terms of adoption. So this isn't necessarily meant to be any different to that. Not to mention, then I think people sometimes get even the definitions of the words sort of mixed up. Like, we're never going to all be equal on all things, especially something like money. But what Bitcoin does is it brings more equality to the rules, because it's the same rules for everyone, which means everyone has a similar kind of opportunity. Whereas at the moment, this system, the rules are very much to favor a very few, the top 10%, the top 1%, the top 0.1%, which means that it's always going to have that outcome. You're always going to have inequality because the rules are corrupt. Whereas Bitcoin has rules that are incorruptible, which means that you are going to have more equality just in the rule set. But that doesn't mean that everyone becomes equal. And I think sometimes, people, when they have that FUD kind of argument, they're mixing the two things up. They're saying like, well, you can never be all equal on Bitcoin, therefore it's not equality. It's like, I think the rules are equal. There's a sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say it's. Yeah, I was going to say it's also it's not a communist type of equilibrium. It's like it's more if you're productive to society, you should be rewarded for that productivity.
Yeah.
At the same way that anyone else is rewarded for their productivity. Not I'm at the top of the pecking order. I can decide where to allocate money and wealth. Even though potentially I'm not contributing to society. That's the system we kind of live in now. We have the the governments and politicians and the people with inverted commas power who get to create value without adding adding any productivity to society. Whereas the people that are really adding the value to society and the people that are productive are constantly just getting hammered, and that's the inequality that sucks. So having a set of rules where you can't produce value out of thin air is a pretty simple concept and seems pretty fair. But obviously, that's not what we have now, and that's what hopefully the Bitcoin standard brings.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I'm curious to know, like, is that one of the biggest threats to Bitcoin that you think it is? Like the fact that people perceive it still as being somewhat of a broken or an unfair system, or are there other threats in mind to Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's always a tough question because you do get in that frame of mind where you know that it's going to improve the world, but I think I think we're probably sometimes you get away from yourself and you do realize that the system does need to transition slowly, that there will be some pain probably felt by everyone as we transition and to a potentially new system, and hopefully that new system is Bitcoin. But I think you do have to be a bit cautious about it. I definitely have changed the way that I talk about it to people in terms of investing in it. I have a much more sensible view of put a small allocation into it on a dollar cost average basis, and that amount has probably got smaller over time. I tell people if you can afford to put $100 a week or something like that. I think what are the risks? I mean, obviously the risk is actually I was reading something interesting the other day about there is actually a flaw in Bitcoin where we reach a certain block and there's a bug where the blocks won't be able to go any higher.
Yeah, the block header overflow bug. So actually, last week we had an interview with Russell, the other Rusty, the one that works on Lightning for Blockstream, and so he has had a conversations previously with others like Nifty and I about the block header overflow bug, and so we talked about it a bit in that podcast. My understanding is that it's a problem that pretty much all developers in Bitcoin are aware of. It's a problem that has to be fixed. It also has to be a hard fork. Well, at least that's what it looks like at the moment. But at the same time, there's a long time to be able to do it. It's about 100 years until that's an issue. So it'll probably be one of the least contentious hard forks and one of the least risky hard forks, because there'll be 100 years for people to upgrade their software essentially until it ever becomes an issue. But there's things like that are like hidden, aren't they? Because I only found out about that around sort of 6-ish months ago. And it's only until talking to Rusty recently that I got more clarity about like, oh, okay, so sounds like it's all under control, basically. But when you first hear about those kind of things, and also knowing that there could be other things that are like that we haven't come across yet, that's right. It begs for a bit of caution, or at least to know that, there's some unknowns in this whole thing as well.
Yeah. There's things like that pop up occasionally that that shocked me that I'm like, oh, okay, hey, well, hang on a second. And one of the issues with a hard fork is that you kind of there's contention at the moment. I haven't heard about it in a little while. Over that potential upgrade to Bitcoin with the vaults and things like that. I can't remember the
The
word.
OpCTV or BIP 119 or covenants. Yeah, that one.
Covenants, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, stuff like that, and getting something through like that. I mean, this is obviously this problem has probably a little bit more consensus across the board. But the one of the things that came up was during this covenants discussion was that it is getting harder to change the code of Bitcoin, which I'm a fan of. And I was almost like, well, maybe we should start to think about locking down the idea of not being able to change it anymore. But then you hear about something like this problem that we have to fix sometime in the next 100 years, and it's like, well, hang on, well, do we need to tackle that earlier rather than later? Because the bigger the network gets, the harder it is to change the code. Back in the day, Satoshi could just change the code and tell everybody to upgrade. Now it's a pretty big deal changing the code. UASF was an interesting situation where node operators upgraded to kind of vote basically on this thing, and that kind of went through in that way. But it gets so. Do we have to fix that earlier? Is it bad if we wait 50 years before we think about it? So things like that occasionally will pop up, and you have to talk about it out loud. It's not like we can keep it hidden. It's something you kind of just have to talk about.
Absolutely, because it opens up the door, and this kind of came up in the conversation with Rusty in terms of, all right, so if we did a hard fork to fix this problem, wouldn't that be an opportunity for people to start piling in and saying, all right, well, while we're doing a hard fork, and given this will probably be the last hard fork we ever do, or for the next 1,000 years or whatever, maybe we should clear out these bits and pieces that we don't use, or maybe we should rethink the supply cap, or maybe we should look at like what happens, once we get to that, that final block and Bitcoin being mined, not final block, sorry, but Bitcoin. Does it open up those conversations? And at the moment, if those conversations were had, I'm sure that most of them would just be dismissed. However, fast forward 10 years, 30, 50 years, people forget. There's a very good reason that the human race tends to maybe not repeat history, but it all very much rhymes. And maybe at that point, people start to humor the idea of saying, well, maybe 21 million is too restrictive. Maybe we need like a trail emission similar to Monero or something. Like those conversations could very well come up, and we don't know the state of, I guess, who is providing consensus in 30 or 50 years' time. I'd love to think that's still all just the users and the node runners, but even that covenants thing recently has brought into contention, well, do developers or industry participants or miners, do they actually have maybe too much power? Like, should this be going back to the users even more than what it is at the moment? But who knows what that's going to be like in 50 years' time? Some things that we think would never debate that could become debatable at that point. And especially if we are definitely going to do a hard fork, to me, that means it just opens the door to all those conversations that, even if they don't happen, like even if we didn't update the supply cap, that would be pretty bad news in terms of perception for a long while if we even started talking about that, which again, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, even the conversation. But I'm just thinking, a couple of decades go past, a new generation, and all of a sudden it's like, why did we do this 21 million thing? That's really restrictive. Maybe we need to change that. So like that's to me, maybe one of the biggest threats, kind of linked in with what you mentioned, like the block header overflow and the hard fork, is that, it just opens up the door to a bunch of shit that we know that we shouldn't do now, but maybe we don't know that we shouldn't do that in future when there's different people that are involved in making the decisions.
Yeah, that's why I like the toxic Bitcoin maximalist approach, because even though we get a lot of slack for that, being mean to shitcoiners, it is kind of important, right, to have a community that understands how Bitcoin works and understand that we're not something like Ethereum where we just go, hey, I've got an idea, let's give it a go. It's like and I hope that kind of movement continues to grow, and like almost like the same way that nodes grow, because you do need that base of people that are always have that thinking of, this is the way the system was designed. It's designed on, on purpose. It works. Don't break it. And yeah, so it kind of you kind of need that constant flow of people into that mindset. Otherwise, yeah, you never know what happens in 50 years. Maybe we'll be on our deathbed and hearing about Bitcoin, adding stupid smart contracts, and shitcoiners are now the developers of Bitcoin, and they can control more and more, and that would suck. That would
Absolutely.
yeah, that would be a risk. But that's why I kind of like the idea of locking it all up, because I kind of have that thought sometimes that, well, hang on, if the developers that have I mean, the thing about changing the code is that the users can still not agree with it and use another implementation. So
True.
So if someone does, I was having this chat with a bunch of I had Stephen Livera really nicely came and did a talk with a bunch of like CEOs and kind of high net worth individuals that I was asked to kind of host a bit of an informative chat, and Stephen Livera came on and spoke to them about really, it's really hard to tell people more about Bitcoin in the space of like an hour, but he did a really good job, and I did a follow up chat with them like a few weeks later, and one of the main things was the skepticism, the fact that they were saying, well, hang on, well, someone could just change, isn't it possible just to change the 21 million cap? And you can't lie about that. It is possible for us to change the 21 million cap. And so the answer is, well, yes, technically it can change. Practically though, it won't. And that's a really hard concept to try and explain. And the answer I got back from this guy was, well, if it can change, it will, because people at the top always have a way of changing it, of changing things. So yeah, I mean, I can see that point, but if there's enough, as long as we keep the consensus that we don't change the fundamental, the things that make Bitcoin valuable, as long as we don't change those things, then we're okay. As soon as we change something like the 21 million cap, or we roll back the chain like Ethereum or something like that, we've kind of destroyed. We've kind of done, in my opinion, irreversible damage. And it's only kind of downhill from there. So I'm kind of the opinion that it'd be great to be able to eventually lock things up once we get to a certain point.
I agree. And look, even if we can't lock things up in a technical manner at the moment or for the foreseeable future, I agree that locking things up maybe is culturally the right word. Like if toxic maximalism is kind of like an immune system response, and that's the culture in the space, it will be so significantly difficult to change things, even if technically it's possible. That culture can be the protective immune system, basically, that rejects ideas that are in contradiction with the original thesis of what Bitcoin is and why it's designed the way that it is. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and it's not like we can lock it up. We can't. There's no actually someone that can go and turn the key and throw the key away. Anyone, I can go copy the code right now and change it to 44 million instead. And I mean, the point is that I'd need everyone in the world to decide it was a good idea to go with my fork. And so, which is just obviously not going to happen. So yeah, so that's I guess. Locking up, in a sense, is the culture. Yeah, the culture is the key that can be thrown. That can be locked up and thrown away. We need to keep that everyone with that knowledge base. We need to almost like pass down the knowledge to the next generation so that they understand.
I agree, and the beautiful thing about it is that I've seen so many people embrace toxic maximalism over time, even people that were initially against it or were put off by it or complained about it. I think eventually when enough bad stuff happens, people start to realize the benefit of that toxic maximalism, and that, when people talk about shitcoins or not putting your money into places like Celsius that will rehypothecate it, like they do that in a very harsh way. But when shit really hits the fan, it starts to become really obvious why it's done in a harsh way. And people start to appreciate that and realize it's coming from a place of, I don't know, love sounds very sort of fluffy, but it kind of is coming from a place of like love and understanding of the fundamentals and like wanting good things for all people and, all society. And that's why there is such a vitriol to it sometimes, because we know that the system is broken. So when we see the existing system trying to be like implemented into Bitcoin in some way, or trying to distract people from Bitcoin, that's why things get toxic, because there is no point having that discussion or that debate. It's already been done. It's already failed. We know Bitcoin is the answer. So yeah, I guess the way I started that point was that the good part is people seem to be trickling gradually into toxic maximalism as well, or at least softening their stance to it and saying, maybe this isn't actually a bad thing. Maybe this is going to turn a few people away initially, but this is what will keep the whole system stable and reliable in the longer term.
Yeah, and there's a sliding scale on toxic maximalism. I like to think
True.
I'm a nice toxic maximalist.
Likewise.
I'm not. And actually, that's why I like memes so much, because you can have a. So I used to get angry at shitcoiners and Bcash people, and you'd have these arguments online, and it just you get really frustrated and you get really angry, and but there's something about a meme that can just sum up your thoughts and add some humor to it, and make your point, and leave it at that. And I find that a good way to go. Is why I'm really enjoying the Meme Factory guys, because they have this great way of getting together a thought, chatting about how that it could be a good meme, and then putting it out there as a way to send the message without turning it into just a yelling fest. It's a really clever way to use humor.
Absolutely. And I think it's just people are more receptive to it as well. When you can point out the absurdity of things and use humor, they're more likely to chuckle about it. And all of a sudden you've now, like, that armor is cracked. They're now thinking about that too. They're seeing it elsewhere, and it gives the idea more credibility. Whereas sometimes explaining something with words or in detail, people have sort of dismissed it at the first sentence, so they don't get towards the end. Whereas an image, it's there. It's already gotten past the defenses, basically.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's like it's almost like the way that you learn things sometimes by discovering it yourself is more effective. So having a meme and getting people to understand the meaning behind the meme, the meaning of it therefore sticks with you longer, or is more effective with sticking with you. And I like that. I think that's cool.
Definitely. Well, Rusty, I've really enjoyed this chat, but I'm aware that I've got about 10 minutes and then I've got a hard stop. So I was curious, did you have any topics in mind that you thought we were going to talk about that we didn't talk about that would be good to finish up on? And if not, do you have any final thoughts to give?
I don't know. I feel like I've covered all the things that I like talking about. I think it's just the long term wise. I think people need to focus on that, and just hang in there. I've been through, a lot of people have been through these cycles, and I listened to a podcast the other day that Peter McCormack was talking to someone that was in the early 2011 cycles, and when you hear someone talking when they've been through multiple cycles, been through the Mt. Gox crash and seen their Bitcoin gone from $1,200 to a penny, or to all these previous cycles, you realize this has all happened before. And it comes back stronger every time, and it comes back bigger, and there's always bigger news, and there's always the next cycle brings more adoption, not less. And so I think if there's anyone out there that's worried and losing conviction, just go back and have a look at some of those stories, and you'll kind of see that it always comes out. It always comes out on top. It's a never-ending force that keeps getting stronger, and powers that be might try and hold it back. But my conviction grows every day. So I think people need to hang in there.
I think it's good. It's good advice. And if I mean, if we can call this a bear market at 20,000 when that was the peak of 2017 when I got in, this seems like a good bear market to me, even if we go lower. But the common theme that comes up in bear markets in Bitcoin is that this is when all the productive stuff gets done. So this is when you double down on your fundamentals and researching and understanding and trying to contribute in some way, or at least just be involved. So yeah, I want to just kind of mirror what you said there in terms of anyone who is stressed out by all this, is that kind of stay humble, stack sats, keep involved in the industry if you can contribute. But if not, just keep abreast of the fundamentals, the news, and hear some of those stories of OGs that have been through at least a cycle, but maybe even more than one, because it starts to bring a bit of clarity to the situation and calms everything down a bit as well. So
definitely. And I like the point that you make where more stuff gets done in bear markets, and it's true. I've noticed, even my wife notices it as well. If the price goes down, I'm usually at my computer desk a lot more, and she'll know if I'm looking like I'm head deep in work that probably the price is down that day. So it's like it's kind of a natural thing that you just go, oh crap, okay, well, rather than focusing on on that beach house that I had my eye on, I need to go back to work. So
absolutely,
it just happens. Yeah.
Look, we can't be greedy and celebrate all-time highs all the time. I'd love it if we could, but at the same time, when it's not an all-time high,
I wouldn't mind some euphoria.
I'd love it too.
To be honest.
But I guess when it goes down, we don't have to be destitute. We can then say, all right, well, look, I can't celebrate. I'm not going to be euphoric, but I can be productive. And the euphoria will come eventually in the fullness of time.
Yeah, it's coming when we least expect it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we can be assured of, is when we least expect it.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for your time, Rusty. I really enjoyed the chat. Anyone who hasn't seen Rusty's work, definitely check out both his Twitter, which is, what is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, WorldofRusty across every platform pretty much. So WorldofRusty. I post my cool stuff up there. Any arts that I do that I really like, I post up there. Thumbnails, art for plebs. And anyone can contact me for work or check out my merch on my store to keep me going through this bear market.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Well, again, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. And otherwise, until next time.